You're here today because your cyberpunk story has body modification, but everyone has them. Chrome arms, neural implants, but it really doesn't have an impact on your story. So today I'm going to show you how to make these augmentations feel real by using examples in other literature and my own work. So we'll cover 3 things today. The first is why you should use augmentation as a way to identify class structure. The second will be social cost to Chrome. What do you sacrifice as a human when you do that? And third, how to create a body modification hierarchy that creates real conflict. Quick question though before we start. Does your world have rich people without augmentations and you can't explain why? Well, that could be your problem right there. Here's the problem. Some cyberpunk stories treat augmented upgrades as simple as video game like customization. You're gonna give this character a robot arm? Sure. Neural implant here? Sure. But we're failing to ask a very complicated question. Who can afford these things? More importantly, why would someone do it and who's forced into it? And probably just as relevant, who's opting out of it? Corporate executives in my story get seamless bio-enhanced upgrades that are only leased. In fact, when they die, they're quietly removed and replaced and put into another person. The middle class, however, goes into debt trying to get these various upgrades. They go to a licensed professional, pay roughly 2 to 5 years worth of salary, and then get their upgrade, and next thing you know, they are perfectly acceptable. But they constantly live in fear of repo men coming and taking essentially their product back, which essentially means their lives. The poor, however, will rely on ripper docs who use secondhand equipment, not really the nicest people around the planet, and also just in general, don't really care about your well-being at the end of the day. They just want to be paid. It comes down to this. My mods tell people that if it's invisible, you're elite. If you can see it, you paid for it at a good rate, and if it's kind of janky looking, you're kind of poor. This way you can kind of tell that my class system isn't just necessarily about like showing who's rich and poor with suits, but rather through what they have augmented on their bodies. Body modification should act as a way to identify power structures. The more chrome and more subtle it is, less human capital you possess. Rich people stay flesh because, well, their value is inherently tied to decision making. So what happens to you when you basically augment yourself? What do you lose in general? Because this is a viable question overall. Every augment has some type of social cost. Not even just saying, oh, you're less human, because that's somewhat obvious, but at the same time, if you're rich in my system, you don't really stand out in that way. And most of those times it's boring, and here's what I want to do instead. Here's one of the things about my story that how I integrate this. The moment you give yourself a modded upgrade through one of the corporations, you basically are no longer your own. Your data, all gone. Your personality, all gone. And truthfully, you don't really have much to go with because at the end of the day, you've given just everything, including your body, to the corporation. You have more or less traded yourself to be more powerful, efficient, and part of the upper class. This is something that William Gibson understood when he wrote Neuromancer. Chrome isn't about empowerment. Rather, it's a dependency. Your body will ultimately become an infrastructure that someone else controls. So here is your design question when moving forward when it comes to what you lose when you are becoming more augmented chrome-wise. What are you giving up? Whether it's privacy, the ability to have biological children, the ability to go off-grid, emotional regulation, make the costs hyper-specific. So let's talk about chrome tattoos. You know, those glowing dermal implants that people get? Those shouldn't just be simple, cool little tattoos. They should signify classes in your story, if possible. This basically shows that people can simply say, I have the ability to pay for something that has no eternal use. You know, I have throwaway money. They're considered like the designer handbags of my culture. When you see a character with chrome tattoos in Cyberpunk, you should think of them as someone as they're wealthy enough to modify for fun. That's not transhumanism, in fact. That's conspicuous consumption. It's the same reason why rich Victorians had tiny dogs. Body mod should be about labor, control, and survival, not about looking cool. So here's how you actually structure this in your world. You create a 3-tier hierarchy. Tier 1 can be focused primarily on survival, prosthetics for the injured, medical implants, basic labor augmentation. These are a necessity, not by choice. Tier 2 are performance-based, neural interfaces, combat enhancements, sensory upgrades. These give you an edge, but ultimately they will create dependency. The third and final tier, luxury modifications, aesthetic chrome, recreational implants, status symbols, these mark you as wealthy. And also part of it is not being able to see it as chrome, more like lifelike objects. The conflict will come when your character moves between tiers. E.g., we'll see that people on the lower end, the poor end, will have this really unique chrome system where it's really, ugly looking and old looking, and just really, some of it could be rusting, just kind of establish that this is not the best quality stuff. But as he goes to school, he starts to see a little bit more subtle and cleaner versions of the tech he thought he saw down in the lower levels. For writers of speculative fiction and cyberpunk specifically, this matters because your world's technology should show some type of value. Who gets to modify? Who is forced to modify? Who can abstain? Those answers tell us everything about your world and power. Quick recap: treat body modification as a way to highlight class disparity rather than simply looking cool and aesthetic choices. Every augment should have some type of cost, whether it's social, financial, or even just a power cost. Make that specific and build a 3-tier hierarchy involved. So here's my question for you if you're writing cyberpunk. In your world, do rich people have less chrome or more chrome? Drop your answer in the chat below and I'll respond to everyone. I'm genuinely curious if you built a world around this concept. If you want to see how I turn cyberpunk corporations into more than just simply evil governments, click on the video here to view that next. Thanks for watching, and follow for more world building advice about cyberpunk and fantasy.